And in the last half hour or so, the Prime Minister has ordered an inquiry into allegations of Islamophobia made by the Conservative MP Nusrat Ghani.
We are joined now by the Education Secretary, Nadhim Zahawi. Morning to you, Mr Zahawi. Great to see you. Thank you for talking to us here on BBC Breakfast this morning. Just, first of all, your reaction to that announcement that came, didn't it, in just the last few minutes of this Cabinet Office inquiry into allegations from the former Transport Minister Nusrat Ghani that her Muslim faith had made some of her colleagues uncomfortable. Your reaction to that news?
Good morning. I think it's important that the Prime Minister made sure that he spoke to Nus Ghani and, of course, asked the Cabinet Office to conduct an inquiry. She is a valued colleague, has been a assiduous backbencher, working very hard on a number of very important issues, and of course a minister, of course, as well. And she's made some serious allegations. The Prime Minister takes these things very seriously. At the time, a couple of years ago, when she went to see him, he wrote to her and asked her to make a formal complaint about those. She chose not to. She explained why in a statement last night, and the Prime Minister acted on that to make sure that a senior civil servant looks at this. And I think it's important that we do this properly, which is why I think it's the right decision. I'm pleased this has happened. Of course, you know, in Nus's statement last night, she also says, to be fair to her, that she thinks maybe someone who did say something like this wasn't even a member of the Conservative Party. So we need to see the evidence, and I hope she presents that evidence. I would certainly want her to do that to the Cabinet Office.
I want to talk to you in a moment, actually, about why she felt she couldn't make a complaint at the time. But first of all, I just want to ask you this. Do you think maybe she has been poorly served by the party, considering this all happened almost 2 years ago?
Well, as I just said, 2 years ago, the allegations that she made were taken seriously and taken very seriously by this Prime Minister. And he did write to Nus to say she should make a formal complaint through the party process. Of course, she also spoke to the...
Is that taking it seriously, though?
Well, I think the Prime Minister has always taken this seriously and will continue to do so. It's also important to note that Nus went before Professor Singh, who conducted the Islamophobia inquiry, to explain exactly what happened. We also know, and we have to be really careful here, because one of the great values of this country is fairness, that the Chief Whip, Mark Spencer, has come out and named himself and said that these allegations are untrue and defamatory. So we need to make sure that the Cabinet Office and the Prime Minister made the right decision to get the Cabinet Office to look at this swiftly and to report back. And I hope Nus does make that evidence available to the Cabinet Office. And I think this is dealt with swiftly.
Do you think that in any other area of life, in any other office, business, anywhere that you work, if somebody made an allegation of this type, do you not think that the reaction then would be to maybe have a conversation, immediately do something about it, rather than write a letter?
No, I think there was a conversation, and I think she did go and see the Prime Minister, and then he responded back to her in writing. That was the correct thing to do. I have to say, these are really serious allegations, and no one makes those easily. It's it takes a lot of bravery for someone to stand up and say this and make these allegations, which is why we have to look at this quickly but thoroughly, which is why the Prime Minister made the right decision to get the Cabinet Office to look at this thoroughly. That's, I think, what Nus would have wanted. When I read her statement, I think that's what she was preferring to happen. I think it's only important now that she makes that formal complaint and presents the evidence, and then for that senior civil servant to look at that very seriously and thoroughly and swiftly.
Let's talk about why she perhaps didn't make a formal complaint at the time. Let's go back to the Singh report that you just mentioned there. That was in May 2020, the independent review into allegations of Islamophobia in the Conservative Party that was described by Lady Varsi, the party's former chair, as a whitewash. She disagreed with the review's conclusion, saying there was no evidence of institutional racism, saying, in fact, there were issues in the party from the top to the bottom. Is that something you recognise in your own party?
So I've been a member of the party since the 1980s, and I've been an activist, I've been a volunteer, I've been a councillor. I was a councillor for 12 years, 3 terms in the Conservative Party. I've been a member of Parliament, a minister. I certainly don't recognise institutional racism in my party. I'm very proud of my party's track record on anti-Semitism, on racism, and there is no room for Islamophobia or any form of racism, as I said in my tweet over the weekend, in my party, which is why I think when you make such serious allegations, they should be swiftly investigated, and it's only right that you're given the opportunity to present your evidence and to make that formal complaint. But Professor Singh actually made a number of recommendations which are effectively making sure that we go even further. We're overhauling all our processes as a party to make sure that we deal with these things. And that's important as well, because I may have not experienced it, but if other colleagues have experienced this, it's right that we address this issue and address it rapidly, but do it thoroughly.
Mr. Zahawi, I'm just curious. I mean, you are Education Secretary. We're at a time of huge change in terms of children, whether they're going to wear masks in classrooms. I'm going to talk to you about that in a second. But your job is to deal with that. I am just curious to know, when you come on here to talk to the viewers who are watching us on BBC One this morning, are you a little bit fed up of having to constantly defend your party and your Prime Minister?
Well, I think on the big calls, and you remember I was the vaccines minister, deploying the vaccines. On vaccines, I'll tell you a small story I'll share with you. We had a call from Pfizer-BioNTech to say you have the opportunity for 60 million doses for the winter, but you have to make a decision within a week. This was right at the beginning of the vaccine program when we were deploying phase 1. And we went to the Prime Minister, and a number of advisors said, we don't need to buy these 60 million doses. I said to the Prime Minister that we should go ahead with this, and he actually said, no, we should go ahead, just in case there's a variant that we'd need to boost against. We wouldn't have had a booster campaign if he hadn't made that decision. Okay. On the Omicron pre-Christmas, so on the big calls, this Prime Minister's got it right.
You're not really answering my question, though, are you? Are you fed up with this?
What I'm saying to you is, if your viewers look at the big decisions to keep the economy open, the most open economy in Europe, to make sure that the protection for jobs is in place, 400 billion going into that, and on vaccine deployment, this Prime Minister's got it right. But he's human, and we all make mistakes, and he made a mistake. He came and apologised to Parliament. We've had the apology. Now we need the actual detail, which is why Sue Gray's report is important. And we'll get that, and the Prime Minister will make a statement to Parliament, as he has said he will do. That's important. I carry on making sure that schools remain open. We're delivering I'm
going to move you on there, Mr. Zahawi, if you don't mind, because I don't think we're not going to get that answer, are you, about whether you're fed up or not. So let's just move on, shall we, to the front page of the Daily Mail this morning. Entire cabinet would back a tax hike delay. That is their headline. The story suggesting the whole cabinet will back the delaying of the national insurance hike. They're saying this is to help families hit by the rising cost of living crisis. What do you make of that? Is that true?
So let's just unpack and understand what that national insurance increase is about. It is about delivering £36 billion into adult social care, which has been broken for many, many decades. Successive governments have not dealt with it, and it breaks many, many families and people in old age because they can't deal with it. And of course, going into the NHS. Now, the 14% highest earners pay 50% of it, and the 6.1 million of the lowest earners pay nothing into it. So it's as progressive as you can make it. And if you're serious about dealing with adult social care, this Prime Minister is another big call, another big decision, but the right one to make, then that's the way to deal with it.
So what's happening with it then?
To mitigate against the cost of living, then we're putting £12 billion to work over the next 2 years, including £500 million to local government who know the families that need that help with those utility bills.
Would you back a delay?
No, because I think it's the right thing to do to make sure that we absolutely deliver that 36 billion into adult social care, that the highest earners, 14% of the highest earners, pay half of that, and 6.1 million of the lowest earners don't pay anything for it. If we're serious about actually finally dealing with the issue of adult social care, which has been broken over many decades, then this is the right thing to do.
OK, let's move on to schools, shall we? Because you have lifted the need for masks in secondary schools in classroom situations. Many head teachers are suggesting that they will keep that rule in place currently for as long as they want to. What would you say to a head teacher who wants their pupils to continue to wear a mask in the classroom?
Well, I trust head teachers and teachers to do the right thing. I work very closely with them, and I'm proud of that. I work very closely with directors of public health, and head teachers and teachers will agree that wearing masks in classroom actually causes a communication challenge and a learning challenge, which is why I didn't want them to be in the classroom a day longer than necessary. When the scientists told us that the peak has been reached on Omicron and we're seeing a plateauing and a real reduction, for example, in ICU numbers, then it's the right decision we made to take that guideline away last week. We continue to work with directors of public health
who continues to do that?
I didn't catch the question.
Would you sanction or punish a head teacher who continues to insist pupils wear a mask in the classroom?
No, I will work with head teachers to support them where we can. We're announcing £8 million today going to secondary schools, about £1,000 to secondary schools and special schools to help with the vaccination programme of 12 to 15-year-olds, so that we're at 50%. 1.5 million 12 to 15-year-olds have had at least one dose. We want to go much further, which is why we're announcing that £8 million from NHS England to support teachers to be able to do some of the admin work around the vaccination programme. That's really important, as well as, of course, testing twice a week, making sure that we continue the work that we're doing in education to support teachers to remain, make sure schools remain open and children to be in school. Yeah. That's the right thing. I spoke to directors of public health last week, again, who are doing a tremendous job. If there's a local outbreak and they need to go further, for example, with masks in communal areas, of course they can do that and do it well and do it temporarily. But everybody knows that having children in school, in classroom, actually learning and without masks is the right thing to do.
I just want to ask you one more very quick question. We're really short on time, so briefly if you can. The deadline for mandatory vaccinations for NHS staff is just a few days away if they're going to have their very first jab. There are suggestions this might be delayed. What do you know about that?
So there are 1.2 million full-time equivalent people working in the NHS, and I'm proud to say that over 9 in 10 have been vaccinated already. So might there be a delay? Since we made the announcement on the mandatory, by the way, I think people who work with the most vulnerable people in hospital have a duty of care, as surgeons do. Surgeons can't practice surgery unless they're vaccinated for hepatitis. So it's important that people get that vaccine. When we announced this policy, there was about 100,000 people left who hadn't had a vaccine. That's down now to 70,000. I encourage everyone to get themselves protected. 90% of people in ICU today are unvaccinated. So it's really important that people, including those in our NHS, get themselves vaccinated. And I think they're doing a tremendous job in making sure they heed that call and come forward.
Nadhim Zahawi, thank you very much indeed.
Thank you.